You are listening to the Simple Farmhouse Life podcast, episode 47. I'm sure that it won't be this way whenever the episode comes out, but today we are experiencing extremely nice weather. The high today, I believe, is 67 degrees, which is perfect because I've been very reluctant to turn the air conditioning on here. I always feel like once the AC goes on, I have to shut all the windows, close everything down tight, and just keep this perfectly climate controlled house, which in July I love. But as long as the nights are still dipping down below 70 and I can put a box fan in my window, I embrace the windows open just as long as possible. So this is a nice welcome day because it was getting probably in the mid 80s in our house yesterday. And today everything is back down to where it's almost chilly, which I fully embrace and will not be putting on a jacket because it feels so good. But I love summer. Summer is by far my favorite season. And this has been probably in the last 5 years that I've discovered this about myself. I think when I was a kid, I loved it because summer break. But now that I'm a mom, I just love the free feeling of not having to bundle kids up. We go outside bright and early. The kids sometimes are outside before 7 o'clock. No shoes on. I don't have to worry if they are dressed properly. The daylight, I just love every part of it. It just feels so free. The days are long. And best of all, I am obsessed with all the things that are growing in the garden and everything going on around our property. So that's what I want to talk about today. I'm going to give a little summer homestead update. Now, of course, it isn't actually summer. It's technically still spring, but it feels very much like summer most days. So we're going to go ahead and call it the summer update. I'm going to talk about milking goats, what's growing in our garden, and give a little Daniel update as well. My name is Lisa, mom of 6 and creator of the blog and YouTube channel Farmhouse on Boone. Join me as I share with you my love for creating a handmade home from scratch cooking and a little mom and entrepreneur life along the way. So first up on the list, let's talk about goat milking because this is new. Last time I shared a homestead update, I believe we had just gotten the goats. So my friend Stephanie, who lives down the road, she parted with her beloved Jenny. She is a Nigerian dwarf mixed with a Saanen. So she is a miniature breed. The plan was that we would get her, she would birth her babies here, and then after a couple of weeks, we'd milk her. And that has all transpired at this point. So I'm going to share a little bit about how that's going, my expectations versus reality, and all of that comes with having a dairy animal for the first time here on our property. A few days after Stephanie brought Jenny here, she actually birthed triplets, which was really exciting. It was so neat. I didn't understand usually on Instagram when you see people who have animals that are getting ready to, you have to pardon any construction sounds because Luke is out there working on a project that I'm going to share about in a minute. But anyways, people get really excited and they show their animal and how big they're getting and anxiously awaiting the birth of either a calf or a kid or whatever they have. And it was always neat, but I never understood how exciting that truly is to walk out there and see these 3 tiny animals all fresh and nursing. And it was just such a neat experience. So I think it took us about 4 weeks to get our act together with the milking stand and figuring out where they were going to go when we separated them before we actually started milking. So I've been milking at this point, I would say 2 weeks now. So what we did to get to that point is first we built a milking stand, which I wrote about on my blog and I shared a YouTube video. Essentially, goats are really small and you'd have to sit, like practically lay on the ground if you were going to get under these mini goats to milk them. I've watched people milk dairy cows and they just put a bucket on the ground, tie up the cow and milk right into the bucket. It does not work like that with goats. They also are maybe a little bit jumpier and so they need that restriction, at least my goat does. So I needed to build a milking stand and we found plans for it on a butterfly house. And again, you can find all this referenced over on the blog if you go to farmhouseonboone.com and search goat stand or goat milking stand. It's basically just a tiny table, and then there is a thing at the front. It's called a stanchion that contains their head and a little bucket. So you give the goat a little bit of grain, and then they will be content to stay there. Now, the other issue, once we got that built, was figuring out where we're going to put the kids, because if they nurse all night, by morning, the goat, Jenny wouldn't have enough milk. So what we did was, around 4 weeks, there's a little building that sits between our silo and our barn. And we have not really explored into the history of that just yet, or the purpose and everything. So I don't exactly know what that was used for in the past, but it actually serves as a really nice area. It's a nice enclosure. It's safe and comfortable, where we can put the kids at night. So around 8:30 at night now, my daughters go outside. They do all of the nighttime farm chores. And they put the 3 goat kids, there's 2 bucklings and a doe, in the little building and give them alfalfa, and they just close the door, and then the mom and the kids are separate overnight. Now, the first night I was really sad about this. I felt bad. And little side tangent here, I did have a few comments about that over on my YouTube channel. Like, how could you do that to an animal, separate the babies? And I completely get it. It is sad. There was a part of me that was like, oh, poor mother. But then also, what's the alternative? Am I going to feed my family dairy? Am I going to feed them milk and cheese and kefir? If I am getting that from the store, I am likely supporting much worse practices for the babies. I know at commercial dairies, they're separated right away. They might not live in the most sanitary conditions. So at least in this, I have provided a safe, happy place where the kids frolic about with the mother for 4 weeks. And then even after separating them, it's only 12 hours at night, and then they're reunited and they nurse all day long. So I was able to feel less bad about it, because I know that I'm taking control of our food supply and I'm providing a happy life for these animals, and they get to be with their mom all day. But anyways, on the first milking day, I went out really early. I think it was before 6 a.m. And it was kind of a comedy of errors, I guess you could say. Like, I first didn't realize that I'd have to tie up the other goat. So we have another goat named Blair. She's not in milk yet. She is expecting, and she actually belongs to Stephanie. She's just a hooved companion that I'm currently borrowing. So she's not actually ours. But whenever I brought out the grain that I planned to give Jenny for milking time, I didn't expect how much they would both basically attack me for it, because they'd never had grain before. They've only ever had alfalfa. And so this was really exciting. And so I realized that I would have to tie her up and then give her grain in a separate area so that they both had their own grain. I also didn't realize on day 1 that you either need to shave around the teats or clean it first, because I had a lot of hair in the milk, which, if you've never milked, this probably all just sounds disgusting, but if you think about it, all of our milk comes in this way, and it's not probably any less gross when the farmers do it. It's just, you don't see it. So that has actually gotten a lot better. So a lot of the hair around her teats was knocked off in that first day. And I realized that is something you need to address first. And so now I get very few hairs in the milk, but I do strain it. So that's another thing that I learned. And I mentioned this over in my YouTube channel, but I am totally a try something and learn as I go person, rather than figuring it all out first. So whenever I milked her, I was like, oh yeah, that's right. I remember people saying you have to strain the milk. So I didn't have a proper milk strainer yet, so I just filtered it through a tea towel. I'm getting a little under a quart a day, which ideally I wanted to get a lot more. And my friend Stephanie said that she is getting more like a half gallon a day. I don't know if that's because hers have more access to fresh pasture than ours do, and so maybe they aren't producing as much. Also, Jenny supports triplets, whereas Stephanie's goat has twins. Maybe she waits longer in the morning to milk hers. So I'm gonna have to talk to her about this. We actually have a play date coming up this week, and so I'm gonna ask Stephanie what she thinks. But even still, it's really exciting to go out every morning and gather a quart of milk from our property. I wasn't sure if I would like it, because, it's a commitment. It's not something I'm used to having to go do. I'm used to getting up, drinking coffee, making my kids breakfast, and then moving on with the day. And this just adds something to it. But it's actually a part of my day that I look forward to, and I really like it. It's quiet out there in the barn. The kids are all inside with Luke. My favorite thing is going up into the hayloft of the barn and dropping down the alfalfa. I just look around and I'm like, this barn is so cool. It's just always been a dream of mine to live on a farm. And so this is feeling right. And I can say at this point that I'm enjoying milking so much that I really think we will get a dairy cow. So the thing about goat milk is it's naturally homogenized, so there isn't cream that rises to the top. And I love cream and butter. And so I'm still going to my co-op every week, getting raw milk, getting butter. I'm just getting less milk because most of it is now coming from the goats, but I'm getting tons of butter, tons of cream. So I'm still hoping to eventually gather all of that from our own property, and it will happen. I actually just called someone the other day about fencing, because Luke and I were planning on doing all of the fencing around the property, but there just keeps being more projects that come ahead of it that I'm like, you know what, let's hire this out. This is one of those deals where, yes, we could do it ourselves. We've figured out how to do that when we put up fencing for the goats, but it will make more sense at this point to move that process along, because I really want to get more animals and be more self-sustainable here. So that's how everything's going on the goat milk front. I had a lot of questions about the taste. I really didn't know before this what caused some goat milk to taste so much different. And I'm sure it has to do with the breed, how they're raised. But I also learned from several YouTube commenters that it can also have to do with whether or not you keep a buck. I don't know if that's totally true, because now that I think about it, I think my friend Stephanie has a buck and her goat milk tastes really sweet too. I don't know what it is, but I can tell you that the breed we have that we're milking, it tastes like cow milk, maybe a little bit sweeter even. It's super creamy, very delicious. My kids actually prefer it. I think maybe at this point it's sort of a novelty, like I want the goat milk, but they definitely don't notice any flavor that is off. So that was a really big relief, because I wasn't sure. And here, you're going to be milking something. It's going to take a lot of your time and effort and energy. I wanted to be sure that it was good, and it really is. We've been using it just like we do with the raw cow's milk. We've been using it as kefir. We hardly drink any milk, just plain. We use it for kefir, and we make tons of smoothies. So goat milk kefir, it's been working out great. My kefir grains are loving it. They're producing so many that I'm actually bringing half of them to a couple of friends tomorrow, because I have way more than I can even handle. So that's all going great. Also on the homestead, the garden is flourishing. We have zucchini already that are probably about 6 inches long. I'll be harvesting some of those soon. Herbs, I have herbs in abundance. Basil, rosemary, thyme, oregano, lavender, parsley. Those are all doing amazing, and everything I'm making right now is just full of herbs. So every time I go out there, I just snip some off, because I love adding fresh herbs to all of my foods. Like today I made a deer roast in the Instant Pot, and I just put so much thyme and rosemary on it, because it's really good to distract from any gamey flavor that comes with deer meat, and made it really delicious. We all enjoyed it. Also, we trellised our pumpkins this year, so I will see how that goes. I've never done it. Luke and I built 2 French tutors. I swear, every time I say that word, I just lose all my confidence in pronunciation and just mess it all up. So anyways, those will be wonderful for the cucumbers, butternut squash, acorn squash, and the pumpkins to grow up. I did start several pumpkin seeds indoors, which makes no sense, because basically now we're going to have pumpkins in July versus October. But as a blogger, every year I have the same problem where I want to do fall home tour. And I want to do it usually in August, because as a blogger, you always do things ahead of when other people are thinking about them. because the whole goal is to inspire people and give them ideas. And obviously you can't do that if they've already done their decorating. So I'm always looking for pumpkins before pumpkins are ready. And so I started them super early. So we already have pumpkins on the vines that are probably about 3 inches in diameter. So they're vining all over the place. Some of them have gone up and over the trellis. Some are winding around my raised beds, and I'm just super excited. Tomato plants, they are currently in the raised beds. They're probably up to my eyebrows at this point, but I'm not seeing a whole lot as far as the fruit starting. So I think that's because it just isn't super hot, and I know tomatoes love heat. So those are coming on. Everything seems to be going really well in the garden. Now, one big exciting project that we're working on right now, in fact, Luke's outside and I'm probably gonna go out there and help him here shortly, is we are doing a makeover on the cottage. All right, I had to go get little Daniel. He woke up. That update coming soon. But we have this little cottage in front of our house, and from everything we can gather, we know it's old. The garden cottage wasn't, so we tore that down because it was just way beyond repair. This one we're gonna put more time and money into restoring. It has a really pretty stone chimney. It has beautiful details on the inside like beadboard and a clawfoot tub. It has plumbing and electric. So eventually we'd love for it to be like a guest cottage. And in reality, I'm hoping that we can even accomplish all of that in the next few months. But for now, we're just doing an exterior makeover. It's an eyesore. Currently, it hasn't been painted in who knows how long. So the paint's all just looking really rough and patchy. And it's painted red with green window trim. And so it's definitely not in my color aesthetic. And I always imagined it in sort of a gray blue with white trim and white windows, and then having like a cottage garden in front of it. So I want some wild roses and herbs and window boxes. And I'm picturing like a stone path. And I don't know, I have so many visions and ideas for it. I have to slow myself down because I start getting really excited and just want to finish it all today, and it's gonna be quite a process. So Luke's currently doing demo. As far as a chicken update, we had 3 different ages of chickens. We have the ones that are 1-year-old from last year. We got some chicks in either late February or early March, and then some more about 4 weeks later. So we had the old ones, and then what the kids called the teenagers, and then the babies. And we just recently, they're all big enough now that last night was their first night all together. We've been keeping them all separate just because we didn't know how they would do at such different ages. But the last night was the first night with them all together, and they've done well. Another update on the chickens is that we've started letting them free range. I had a lot of reservations about free range. So far, up till probably in the last 2 weeks, we kept our chickens in a chicken tractor that we moved around every day. So you move it around, they get fresh grass and bugs daily, but you move it every single day. It's a great system and it works, but they still only get access to a small amount. Well, a couple weeks ago, some of our chickens just stopped laying. And we didn't know if it was because we had the tractor in an area that didn't have enough grass and bugs, and it was sort of in the shade, so maybe they weren't getting enough sun. We didn't know what was happening. Well, I talked to my friend and I asked her what they do with their chickens, because she said they don't even have to feed their chickens grain. They just let them free range and they all produce an egg every day and they don't have to even feed them. So I was like, you know what, Luke, we should try it. I was always worried about them going off of our property because we don't live in the middle of nowhere. We do have neighbors on 2 sides. We have houses. I was also worried about predators and even our own dog. But they've been free range for 2 weeks and they do wander all over the property, but they haven't gone too far. And it turns out our dog, he's such a good dog. We got him as a puppy. Luke trained him very well. And within a day, he understood that they're ours. They can just go right by him. He doesn't care at all. And if something comes, he will run it off. So he actually has become quite a protector. We got him for that reason. But with seeing how aggressive he is with other animals, I was worried about it. But it turns out he totally understands that there are animals and he's actually doing what he's supposed to do. So that's protecting him. He is a Anatolian Shepherd mixed with a Great Pyrenees. All right, so that's the summer homestead update. Those are all the things going on around here. Everything just feels bountiful and beautiful at this point. Now let's talk a little bit about Daniel, because I have some Daniel updates for you. It's been a while, and as you all know, I am an avid baby wearer and co-sleeper just because it works so well. It's so easy for the first 3 months just to hold them constantly, and you can hear more about that in earlier podcast episodes, and I've talked a little bit about my baby's sleeping schedules. But in the last month, during nap time, I started noticing that Daniel was getting increasingly more difficult to bounce and rock to sleep. I would kind of bounce him and pat his butt and sing to him and try to get him to sleep in my wrap, and he just wasn't doing it. And so I got the pack and play out and I laid him down in it. And we're officially at the point where Daniel now takes 2 naps a day down completely on his own, which is both exciting and also a little bit sad. It was the first time I can really honestly say that the baby did it before I was ready. Usually it's sort of like, okay, my back hurts, I'm done with this. But this time Daniel chose to do it, and I don't know, I was still wanting him to be in my little wrap, but then now he just loves being down. And so I lay him down in the morning, usually about 2 hours after he wakes up. He'll take about an hour or 2 nap. And then in the afternoon, he woke up a little bit too quick this time, actually. I think it's because his window's open and there's construction going on outside. So an unintended consequence of putting him down for nap during the day is that he also likes to be in his pack and play now at night too. So I started laying him down around 8 o'clock at night. My plan was, okay, I'll lay him down, he'll go to sleep, and then when he wakes up first to nurse, I'll bring him into my bed. Well, the last 2 nights, he didn't wake up until like 2 in the morning. And then I nursed him, and I just laid there to cuddle with him like usual. But he started squirming, and like now that he's gotten used to sleeping on his belly in his pack and play, that's where he wants to be. So I put him back in there, and that's where he slept. So I think we're about done with co-sleeping already, which is sad because I love co-sleeping. But it's also nice because now I can get comfortable without a pregnant belly and without a baby. It's different, but it also gives me a little bit of freedom to make videos without a baby and not be holding him all day long. Another update on Daniel is he has started eating solid food. So Daniel, at time of recording, is 1 week shy of 8 months. And just in the last couple weeks, he's been reaching every time we eat for the food. So far he's tried sweet potatoes, sauerkraut, eggs. I'm giving him a little bit of my sourdough tortillas. What else have you had, buddy? Just little bits of food here and there, bananas, applesauce. He doesn't eat a lot. I just put whatever we're eating on his tray, and whatever he can get into his mouth is what he eats, which usually isn't much. He more tends to smush it into his high chair, but what he gets, he loves. Today, actually, I was giving him little bites of sauerkraut, and we were all laughing because he was making that sour face where you kind of shiver and close your eyes, but he liked it. He kept opening his mouth for more, but he definitely thought it was sour. All right, well, that is the update. That's what's going on around the homestead and what's going on with Daniel. I'm going to get back to my segment where I used to take an Instagram question. And today's question is, can you tell us more about a midwife-led pregnancy? How many ultrasounds you did and tests, etc.? So I have had 4 midwife-led pregnancies at this point and births, and the first 3 were with a birthing center. I still had home births, but I went to a midwife that practiced out of a birthing center as well. And I'd say that the care was slightly different with the CNM, so Certified Nurse Midwife, versus the CPM. This is just in my personal experience and in my area. But the first one was definitely a more medical experience, but to the point where they gave you options. So you could do the test, but it wasn't required. You could do the ultrasound, but it wasn't required. it was always up to you, but the first place definitely had more medical recommendations. For Daniel's pregnancy, he's my most recent. I went to a certified professional midwife. Daniel and Micah were the first two that I did a lot less of the tests. So with them, I didn't do the 20-week ultrasound. I did do the glucose test. My most recent birth, instead of doing where you drink juice and then drink the drink and take the blood glucose test or whatever, she actually sent me home with a diabetic test kit and had me test after meals. So it was a little bit different. But the idea with doing a midwife-led birth is educating yourself, putting yourself in the position to understand more about the process. So I found that with each birth, I was comfortable with letting go a few more tests. With the first 3 kids, even one of the midwife-led births, I did every single thing that they recommended, every test. And then with each subsequent kid, I did less and less for various reasons that I won't get all into at this point. But if you do want to hear more on my birth story, I actually was a guest on the Down to Birth podcast, and they really got me talking about my birth. So I think I revealed more about them there than I normally do, just because it was a birth podcast, whereas obviously this isn't. I do talk about mom life, but I usually leave a lot of those medical things that I'm passionate about out of my content here on this podcast and on my blog. And so if you want to hear more about that, I will leave it down in the show notes, but you can go to the Down to Birth podcast. I think it's one of the most recent episodes of theirs, and I go through my birth experience all the way from Ruthie through Daniel. And then I also do have a podcast, episode 32, where I talk about my hospital births compared with my home births. So that's also something you can get more info on that. But yeah, I think with most midwives, I think it's kind of up to you. You can do all the tests, you can do less tests. They want you as a mom to feel comfortable and empowered. Now, don't hear me say that it's just throwing all caution to the wind. Anytime anything indicated a need for a test, my midwives are all about it with their patients. So if you measure a certain way, so they always measure, they do your blood pressure, they monitor you. If there is any indication for a test, you do them. I just had very uncomplicated pregnancies with Daniel and Micah, which is why I avoided almost all tests. All right, well, that is it. Did you know I have a resource library where I have all of my ebooks in one place? I have a natural cleaning recipes ebook, a sourdough recipes ebook, printable labels for roller bottles. I have a whole library with all of this stuff in it, and you can get access to that at farmhouseonboone.com/farmhouse resources. Make sure to head there and get all of my free ebooks and printables in one place. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Simple Farmhouse Life podcast, and I will see you in episode 48.